BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here.
What's up, Tiger fans? Welcome to another episode of Tiger Talk TV. I am the Corey C. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You don't want to miss a single upcoming episode. You can find us on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So be sure to follow the show and tell every Tiger that you know. And remember, when you support Tiger Talk TV, it all helps the cause, which is the I love, Jackson State University. And joining me today to talk some South Carolina State football is their retired sports information director. He's a radio announcer, sports historian. He's a MEAC Hall of Famer. And even the press box at South Carolina State Stadium is named after him. So it is an absolute honor and a pleasure and a privilege to have with me today the legendary Bill Hamilton. Welcome to Tiger Talk TV.
Well, thank you so much, Corey, and I appreciate the kind words. I'm happy to be on with you this afternoon.
Well, thank you for taking the time out. I know it's a busy week for you. I know you're in the middle of traveling and getting prepared for the game. So we appreciate this. Celebration Bowl week, Jackson State versus South Carolina State. These two teams have crossed paths a few times in the past couple of years. So
How
this is
about
another
that?
national
Yeah.
championship on the line again. So what's
Yep.
the buzz like around town over there and around the campus just kind of leading into this game?
Quite a lot of excitement. I ticket allotment. The initial we got was gone in a day or so, and then we got more.
Wow.
Same thing. So it's been a lot of interest, and although we respect, lots of teams in the SWAC, I think our fans kind of wanted Jackson State. Of course, it's a different regime here. Coach Chennis Berry replaces Coach Hugh, and of course we have TC down there. He's replaced Prime, so it's a whole different. And not a lot of players on your team, I don't think, played against us in 21, and vice
Right.
versa here. We do have some players that are, but probably less than half our team played in that game. So it's a lot of excitement. Of course, it lasts in the opening game last season in the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Jackson handled us quite well, but this is a championship, and I think it means a lot more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we get into this year's team, let's take it back to last year because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the legend, Coach Buddy Pugh. Now, of course, things didn't end the way you would have probably hoped last season,
Right.
but take us through the general sentiment around the program and the university last season after he coached that final game and his storied career finally came to an end.
Well, certainly everybody was appreciative of, what Coach Pugh did in his 21 years as head coach here. And, he was a part of eight, championships in the Mideast Athletic Conference, and of course, three national championships. So, we were hoping the ending would be a lot different. We thought about it after we won the Celebration Bowl in 21 that he may walk that time, but
Mhm.
his last two seasons were not that great. But we still loved him. We had a great send off for him called the Buddy Ball, the roast,
Okay.
and lots of people still appreciate it. And one of the things I can say, he is still around.
Yeah.
Most coaches don't like to have the former coach around. For obvious reason, but he is still around, and he and Coach Berry have embraced each other. In fact, he is the one that went out to Coach Berry and convinced our administration that this is the guy that can lead us back to glory.
Really? Wow. That's
Yes,
awesome.
indeed.
And speaking of Coach Berry, of course, he was given the honor of taking over the program. So, what were some of your initial thoughts of him when he first took the reins?
Well, uh, first at the press conference announced his retirement. I mean his hiring. he sounded more like a Baptist preacher
Okay.
than a coach. But I saw the energy that he brought to the program. I had met him the first year that Benedict went undefeated and went hosted the playoffs. I went over to that game. We had to finish early, and I went over the SID and AD treated me royal, and they introduced me to Coach Berry and his staff, and I was quite impressed with him. Never thought I'd be working alongside him,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly he has been energized. He's a motivator. After that press conference, initially, I asked the players, and some of our best players were there. I said, "What do y'all think about Coach Berry, the new guy?" They said, "Hey, we're ready to put on the pads and play for him right now."
Okay.
So that's the kind of reception he got from our players and the community.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing like winning the press conference as that
How
new
about
coach
that?
coming in.
There you go.
Nothing like winning the
Yeah, he
press
was
conference.
great.
Yeah.
He was great.
So do you feel the fan base was expecting a rebuild in year one, or are they expecting him to come in and win right away like he's doing?
Well, he said at the press conference he wanted to come in and win right away, but all coaches say that. We
Hmm.
had no idea
Right.
this is far from our wildest dreams. We thought he'd come in and start building, and 2 or 3 years down the road have us restored to the place we normally occupy at the top of the league. But this here was totally unexpected.
Yeah.
But as we got started, we lost it, opened the game to FAMU, a game we probably should have won, and
Hmm.
we beat the Citadel. Then kind of got blown out by Georgia Southern in a game that should have been much closer. And people were apprehensive, but once we got to A&T and started that run, went out there in Tennessee and beat Tennessee Tech, in a close ball game. And people start believing, and we had one of our highest attended games. After that. So he's brought a lot of energy to the program, and the fan base is quite excited.
Why do you think he's been able to be so successful so soon?
Well, I think he inherited quite a bit of talent when he came here, and then of course the Porter. He brought 13 guys from Benedict,
Okay.
and many people are grumbling about that today. They can't play at this level. 8 or 9 of those guys are started, and they showed that they can play at this
Hmm.
level. Of course, the quarterback, Eric had
Hmm.
been with him. Fingers had been with him at Benedict, and then he went to Murray State where he didn't play. He brought him back. So some of the top performers on our team he brought from Benedict. Others he found in the Porter, and of course there were some great athletes that he inherited here as well. So, but we did not expect him to have this type of year, but we're quite excited and happy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you are. And then from a staff standpoint, talk about the staff that Coach Barry assembled. Who are a couple guys who were probably the biggest hires that he brought in?
Well, probably he brought most of the guys he brought in. They came from his staff at Benedict. Odafu, the defensive coordinator, of course, Coach Williams, who was a SWAC product himself. I think Coach Williams played for Doug Williams at Grambling, of
Okay.
course, and he's our offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. Odafu, of course, is the defensive coordinator. Those guys, and then he brought 3 other guys from Benedict, and of course, he retained our offensive line coach, who had done a good job. He retained David Blanchard, who's the longest serving coach in our history as an assistant, and but the staff kind of meshed. Some of these guys knew each other, but they meshed, they embrace each other, and like you say, we're 1-0. We don't if we lose, we don't say the defense lost or the
Hmm.
offense lost, the Bulldogs lost. So
Hmm.
it's a real good staff, and I tell you, this is my 51st year here, Corey, and
Wow.
these guys these guys work hard. I've been very impressed with sometime I'm leaving campus. I burn the midnight oil occasion. I see 2 or 3 of those guys car parked at the football complex. So they work really hard, and it's paid off.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, Coach Barry, 9-2 in his first season with losses. You mentioned it, FAMU and Georgia Southern, but
Right.
5-0 in the MEAC. You kind of touched on this, but had I told you prior to the season, especially after the team was predicted to finish fourth in the MEAC, that they'd only lose two
Right.
games and would go undefeated in the conference, would you have believed me, or what would your response have been?
Yeah, I would have thought you might have been giving us more credit than we deserve. But I did hear some rumblings from some of our players about the fourth place pick, because, pick behind Howard was the previous champion. North Carolina Central won it the year before, and Morgan was coming on. So, I could see, I did not have any, bad things to say about the league who picked us fourth, but our guys believe we could do better, and I thought we could do better too. But going undefeated, I certainly knew that Central would be a challenge. Morgan State, their defense was the best in the league and was one of the top in all of FCS most of the year. So we had some challenging games ahead of us in the MEAC, but we persevered, and our guys believe, and it was quite a surprise, but we welcome it.
Mr. Hamilton, let's talk about this team, starting with an offense that averages 35 points a game, pretty balanced attack, over 3,000 yards through the air and right at 1,700 yards on the ground. We'll get into some players individually, but just tell me kind of what stands out overall about the offense in general.
Well, I think you got to start with the offensive line. Three of those young men on the offensive line that he inherited, those guys, they have started now. This is 46 games together. So
Mhm,
there was a lot of cohesion between those guys. They knew each other, just like a picture on a book, So
mhm,
the offensive line, and then the two guys that they added were outstanding players as well. And then you start up Phoenix, a real surprise at quarterback. I never thought we'd have a quarterback that was threatening to Malcolm Long, the great passer we had years ago, his record,
mhm,
but Phoenix is doing that. And the receivers, little guys, and I talked to Charlie Brown at one of our games. He had him on our radio broadcast, and I said, these guys are all small. It kind of reminds me of the Washington Redskins back in the day when they had the Smurfs. But they're
mhm.
all quick. They have good quickness. They have great speed. They're not afraid to go across the middle, and they'll go get it. So, with the Phoenix been a great pass, and these guys, we finished 1, 2, and 3 in our receivers in the
Wow.
MEAC this year. So that was a good thing. And of course, the running back, we lost our best running back to
Yep.
the University of South Carolina, Juwan Howard. But we had some guys that were, Tyler Smith, or also uh, a couple other guys that we thought could fill in. But then he brought DeAndre Duhart from Benedict.
Mhm,
And this guy he showed that he could play at this level. So he's our leading rusher. But Casey Adams,
mhm.
another guy that came in, of course, and of course, I said Tyler Smith. So we have a good balance. Corey, we've had a good balance on offense, receiving, and of course, running the football. And I think that sometimes caused some problems for the opponent.
Mhm. And then going back to Eric Phoenix, the engine, the graduate transfer. He was
Yep.
previously, like you said, at Benedict, and then I went over to New
Yeah.
York State. But man, what a season!
I
HBCU
tell
Plus
you.
National Player of the Year, first team All MEAC, almost
Yeah.
2,500 yards passing, another 368 on the ground, 22 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. I sound like a South Carolina State fan. No, I'm just,
I,
I'm
I
just,
know.
I'm just giving props where
The
props are
facts,
due.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
you're
facts,
right.
facts. Yeah.
Like our offense, you may have mentioned racked up over what 4,600 total yards of
Mhm,
offensive score. A lot of it came on the strength of Eric's passing, because and back in the day, we were a primary running team. But if we had third and long, almost like we were going to be looking at fourth and long, because we weren't a great third down passing team.
mhm.
But he has changed that totally, man. We've had third and long, and I mean, it's just almost like an afterthought. But he connects so well with his receivers, and he's a smart guy. And he's not the doer threat that some quarterbacks are, but he can hurt you with his legs as well. And he's proven that through scoring some having some key runs and scoring some key touchdowns for this team.
And what has he meant to the program, especially in year one, Coach Berry, trying to get this thing off on the right track and having that signal caller, like I said, that engine that he can count on?
Yeah, well, he's meant a lot. I know Coach Berry loves him to death, and I don't think we would be nowhere near where we are 9-2 had not we had Phoenix. Of
Mhm,
course, the backup quarterback is he shows that he can do well, but finding that Phoenix, we did have two quarterbacks here, and they played some in spring ball, and for some reason they decided to leave on their own. I assume, not sure. But the day that we had our spring game, our track meet was I was monitoring, I was recording our track meet, and I was right next door to the stadium, and I could hear the PA, and I kept saying, "Who is this guy, Eric Phoenix?" Eric, because the offense had just ran all over the defense that day, and I was wondering if it was because of great offense or our defense was weak, and I found out it was a combination of both. But he solidified the starting position there in the spring, and he just amplified it during preseason. So he is certainly the catalyst behind this 9-2 run for us.
Mhm. Now, he did appear to get a little banged up at the end of the season. Has his status for Saturday been announced or made public?
Yes, it has. He got hurt in the first quarter against Morgan State, and had a high ankle sprain, and but he's been back in practice the last week, and I talked to him briefly after practice on Monday, and he's ready to go. So
Okay.
we uh, we think he's fully recovered, and he'll be in the starting lineup. And if there's some happening thing, of course, Ryan Stubblefield, the guy that came in against Morgan, I mean, he's a real dual threat, and he
Mm.
has a cannon for an arm, but he does not have the experience, of course, that Eric Phoenix has, and that experience that Phoenix has shown this year.
It didn't appear to be much of a drop off. I mean, I know Phoenix is on a different level, but it didn't fear just looking from afar as far as from the final score. Didn't there
Yeah,
be much of a drop off offensively when you had to go to the
no,
mobile
no,
quarterback?
Ryan Stubblefield, he came in and did a really good job. As I said, he throws the ball well, and he also runs the ball well. And our players have a lot of confidence in him because, early in the year, of course, he came up in mop-up time against North Carolina A&T and did well. And there were other couple games when he got in. You know, not that we were trying to run up the score, but he was very impressive in directing the team when he came in.
You talked about those receivers. I mean, Phoenix has a ton of weapons on offense, a dynamic trio at wide receiver, Caton High, Smith Brown, Carter. They've combined for 145 catches and 17 touchdowns. So talk a little bit more about them and just what they bring to the table.
Well, those guys are really impressive. As I said earlier, they're not real big guys, but they're fast. They have a lot of quickness, and they proved that. And Phoenix had a lot of confidence in them. So anytime we had uh, you know uh, something a major down we need to pick up, of course, Caden High, he led us in receiving. I think he had about 54. Justin Smith Brown, who's one of our top receivers the year before, he had about 46 catches. And of course, Inaj Carter, a newcomer, freshman, they call him Quick Six because, he could get to the end zone so quick. And he was our third receiver and played well, especially down the stretch. He's probably was our leading receiver down the stretch. So all three of those guys were really they were they could run good patterns, and they also, they were good pass catchers, and they protected the ball, because, coaches now teach you can let the receiver catch the ball and try to shake it loose. But those guys all did a yeoman's job for our receiving core. And as I said, they finished 1, 2, 3 in the MEAC, which is kind of unheard of
Yeah, that is.
in a league with as many good receivers there are in the MEAC conference.
And going back to the running backs, you mentioned them earlier. The rushing attack is just as dangerous. A couple guys you mentioned, they've gotten it
Yeah,
done. Adams and then Duhart, they've combined
yeah,
for exactly 1,001 yards on the ground and then 12 TDs. So just talk
yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit about the differences between those two and what they bring.
With Duhart, he's more of a kind of like a scat back. Now he can run inside the tackles, but once he gets outside, he's got outstanding speed, and he can pull away from guys. Of course, KZ Adams, the top backup, a little bit bigger and stronger, and but he had speed as well. I think it was against Fort Valley, when he pulled away for a long, I just couldn't believe he had that kind of speed because I
Mhm.
thought he was more of a breather. And Tyler Smith, who's the guy that we thought was heir apparent to Jawan Howell, who left to go to the University of South Carolina. You know, he did not get a lot of touches early in the season, but starting by mid-season when he came in relief, he ran real hard, and he was a key in that game against North Carolina Central that's kind of put us out front in the battle for the MEAC championship. And he's played well down the stretch. He's been our leading rusher down the stretch, Tyler Smith.
Hmm. And then the O line, you talked about that continuity.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
important for them. Three
Those
offensive
guys,
linemen,
three of
three of
them.
them on the preseason All MEAC first team.
Yeah, and then three of them they made postseason too.
Okay,
Of course,
postseason. Okay.
Nick Tace, the outstanding tackle, left tackle. Uh, he was preseason, and he ended up being the offensive lineman of the year in the MEAC. So he's certainly one of the best blockers in all the FCS. He made the FCS preseason All American team, as you said, and of course Eric Brown, the center. Starting his fourth year, started as a freshman. Awesome, man. He does so many things. He's a great blocker, and he does everything we want him on that line. And he's versatile. He can move. And then Cam Johnson, on the other side, the right tackle. He has just been. He was a real find. We never expected Cam to, when he came in as a freshman. We never expected him to become the player that he has. But those three guys, as I said earlier, they've played beside each other, for about 46 starts, and it tells out there, because our line has done a good job. We've come up with against some great defenses, of course, Tennessee Tech, of course, Morgan State, but our line has done a good job in opening holes for our running backs, and of course, protecting Eric Phoenix.
And we've touched on a bunch of the big names on that offense, but is there anyone else on offense whose name you wouldn't be surprised to hear called on Saturday? Maybe an unsung hero, a guy who doesn't get a lot of credit for what he does.
Keyshawn Keyshawn Tony, our tight end. He
Okay.
has been, he's the fourth leading receiver on there, and he plays a major role. He's an outstanding blocker. Smart kid, runs good patterns, and Keyshawn Tony I would say he would be the ace in the hole. If I wanted to call on somebody else,
Mhm.
that would certainly be the guy.
Mhm. Now, looking at the box scores and not necessarily watching all the games, it appears that this offense is, it's a juggernaut. It's tough to stop. But are there any parts of the offense that has struggled at times, whether it be turnovers, penalties? I know you were mentioning third down conversions on some previous teams earlier, but
Right.
anything like that?
Well, there's been some games that we have our rushing game, despite the talent we have there, it's been stymied a bit. Of course, against Tennessee Tech, we knew they had a great run defense, so we attacked them on the flanks. I think Eric Phoenix had one of his best passing days against Tennessee Tech because we couldn't run on them. Of course, believe it or not, Fort Valley State, a Division II school that we played for. Their coach is leaving and
Hmm.
going to North Carolina A&T. But they bottle us. They bottle up our running game. Throwing a lot of people up there at us, and so and it also happened. Probably against early against Howard. They bottle us up. So we've had some issues there. When our running game was stymied, but we did do well in the air in those games. The coaches made good decisions to change game plans or mix it up, and it paid off for us. But that's where we've been stymied a few times at rushing game.
All right. And then moving over to the defense, the Bulldogs are pretty stingy, holding opponents to just 20 points a game, only giving up 114 rushing yards, only 179 passing yards per game, not to mention registering 36 sacks on the season. So if you're
Yeah.
Jackson State right now, what worries you about this South Carolina State defense?
Well, I would say our defensive line. Those guys are really tough up there. Two of the starters, came from Benedict. Assad, not Assad Hall. Um, I just lost him, but yeah, John Hannibal, and of course Ashad, the guy he led us in sacks. But those guys are relentless, man. You got to be able to block them, and there were times when most of our opponents were not able to block those guys. Unlike when we played Jackson State back in 21, we started out in a three down lineman defense, and of course Shadua had a picnic for early on, and then once we switched, and we got edge rushers. Those guys can do. They're quick, and and they can get around their blockers lots of times. So quarterbacks, the Rashad Hall led the nation in sacks. Number with about 12 or 13, and it's just tough to block them. And I think that's what gives us a lot of opportunities to get interceptions. We down the stretch we had, I think, in our last three ball games, we had 8 interceptions. So because the pressure's coming from the front there, and the secondary, which got whipped up on pretty badly early, Florida and them ran all over us those
Mhm.
last two scoring drives. Of course, Georgia Southern to beat our secondary a lot, but those guys, only one starter was back there,
Okay.
and those guys had to get used to each other. And our secondary has been one of our main defensive weapons down the stretch because they've played so well. And we got a linebacking core, of course, Aaron Smith, who was a candidate for MEAC Defensive Player of the Year. Of course, it went to Morgan State's Elijah Williams, who was certainly one of the best players in the nation. So our defense is really, and Corey, one of the things I can say about, they platoon those guys a lot, so most of them are fresh. We play a lot of we play a lot of defensive linemen. We rotate our linebackers now, and then it's the same way in the secondary. We go about 8 deep there, so the guys are usually fresh. So depth has meant a lot for this defense, and I think that's why we played so well.
You seem pretty high on that defensive line. Which unit would you say is the strength of the defense? Would you say they're pretty equal, or does one stand out over the other?
I would say the defensive line stands out over, yeah, because they make the linebackers and the secondary guys the jobs a lot easier because they're always pressuring the quarterback, making them hurry their throws or sacks, throwing the errant throw. So the defensive line, I would say, would be the key, the
Yep.
top unit on that defense.
Yep. And you mentioned the Shad Hall, a guy we need to look out for on that D line. Double
Yeah,
digit sacks, but there are a number of guys on that defense who've been disruptive all year. You talked about Smith, also candidate for MEAC Defensive Player of the Year. He has 78 tackles. Then there's
yeah,
Addison with 44 tackles from the secondary to go along with
secondary,
three
yeah,
interceptions.
of
Broughton, eight
course,
and a half sacks, 13 and a half tackles for loss. Jones, 43 tackles. So too
yeah,
many to discuss
yeah.
individually, but pick one or two of those guys who's probably been the most important person on the defense and talk about why.
Okay, I would talk. I would certainly start with Aaron Smith, although he's a linebacker, but he's such. He calls the signals for our guys out there. He gets everybody in the right place, and he can play.
Mhm.
He's like I say, he's one of the top tackles on there. So, and he's been a part. He's been in the program for years. He's a senior. So I think Aaron Smith is kind of glue.
Mhm.
But those guys up front, Shard Hall and of course Hannibal, those guys they get down and when they say it's one in the trenches, those guys they are the two guys up front there. What I would say that don't give opponents the most problem.
Mhm. I asked you about some potential struggles on offense. Same question for the defense. Any areas where they've been vulnerable at times?
Well, early in the year it was a secondary, but they made a remarkable maturation there. As I said, we only had one starter back in the secondary, and then the other three guys that were playing were not on the team last year. Maybe one of them was, but they did not start. So there was communication problem. And early in the season, teams they saw the Florida A&M film, of course, and they exploited that. But those guys have matured. They've really played well now, and if anybody's going to attack us, it's probably going to be in the secondary. But they may find this secondary is a lot better than the one they saw early because, as I said, we had about 8 interceptions down the stretch from that group.
All right. So they haven't played since November 3rd. It's a big topic of the debate. Where do you stand on this rest versus rust debate? Do you feel that's an
Uh,
advantage or a disadvantage?
I do not see it as a disadvantage, and because we had some bumps and bruises. We needed some guys to, heal a little bit, and then I think guys just need to get away from football for a little while, because it's a long season,
Yeah.
starting in August, and that type of thing. I remember Now, the last time we played Jackson, I think uh, Dion, thought that Coach Prime thought that the long layoff for us might be an advantage for Jackson, and it probably looked that way early, because but after a while, when once we changed our defensive attack, it didn't make much difference, and I don't think it's a hindrance at all. But some people think a layoff like that, does affect your timing and that.
Hmm.
But our guys, we don't think it made a difference.
Okay. Okay. All right. You mentioned the last meeting. Of course, South Carolina State beat Jackson State 31-10 in the 2021 Celebration Bowl. But then the actual last regular season meeting last season, Jackson State 37-7.
37-7. Yeah, they shut
37-7.
us out until they shut us out
Yeah.
until those. And as I said, it was a different coach at Jackson, and I think their mindset, they came in, with a chip on their shoulders, because they
They did.
most of those most of those guys had played in that Celebration Bowl, loss. A lot of them had, and I mean, they, as they say, when they jump on me before you get off the bus. They were jumping on us before we got off the bus. I think they might have scored on their opening drive, and the floodgates open, and we scored a late touchdown to prevent the shutout. But they handled us quite well in that game, and we never had a chance.
So with the shoe now being on the other foot, with Jackson State winning the last game, and I know South Carolina State has a bunch of new faces on the team who weren't on that team, but has the
Right.
word revenge come up much regarding this game, or is that
Uh,
not much of a motivating
that's,
factor
oh,
since it's a
well, it
championship?
may have come up, but I haven't heard it. And Coach Barry said he didn't want to hear it either,
Okay.
because, like I said, there are different strategies and all. But I think the key here is that this is you're playing for HBCU championship. The MEAC SWAC challenge was a little bit different. You want to win that game, but I think now you're playing for something bigger, HBCU championship, and I think both Jackson State and South Carolina State. Although the characters have changed, the coaches have changed, they want to win this Celebration Bowl because the rewards and the spoils you get uh, a lot greater than the regular season game.
Hmm. Absolutely. A lot of storylines going into this game. There's the SWAC Coach of the Year versus the MEAC Coach of the Year, and then South Carolina State, as we mentioned, was picked to finish fourth in the MEAC. Jackson State was picked to finish third in the SWAC East. So these teams have been proving people wrong all season,
we
and now
yeah
they're looking for icing on the cake.
yeah we've exceeded our expectations, and Jackson State has too. I was watching the SWAC. We were looking at the battle between Jackson State and Florida, and when they met, and everybody kind of assumed that the winner of that game would be the champion out of there. Would be
Mhm.
the Celebration Bowl participant, and much like people assumed with us in North Carolina Central, ever who won
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
game.
we did.
But Jackson, they have some weapons now. And we know that it's going to be a challenge. Of course, their running back, one of the top runners in all of FCS, and
Mhm.
the quarterbacks. I think they've used a couple quarterbacks,
Mhm.
but between those guys, they have racked up a lot of yards. So I think it's going to be a challenge. But uh, you know, I think the key, Corey, is minimizing your mistakes. Penalties, turnovers, because although the last two games against the two teams, we blew them out 31-10. They blew us out 37-7.
Mhm.
I expect this to be one of the closest games we've ever played, maybe decided by a field goal or something like that. Goes down to the wire. I don't see a blowout.
Mhm. Same here.
Yeah.
All right, there you have it. Should be a good one. Could be an instant classic. 12
Yep.
noon Eastern kickoff, 11 a.m. Central, nationally televised game, of course, on ABC. So we're looking forward to it. Any final thoughts before we let you out of here?
Well, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Certainly, I've heard about your work and what you do, and one of my former neighbors is a Jackson State diehard, and we're great friends. He goes to one Baptist church, and I go to one a few blocks away.
Okay.
But we have a lot of fun going back and forth. And one of my all-time great friends, the former SID, Sam Jefferson.
Okay.
If you
Wow.
run into Sam
Absolutely.
Jefferson, give him my good wishes. Sam and I have we've known each other from, I think I met him in 1974, and
Wow.
we've and I my wife has passed on, but the wives had a good time together, and when Chuck Prophet died, I went to I spent Sam and his wife, they hosted me, and of course I count him as a great friend. But and James Carson, who was a
Mhm.
longtime coach at Jackson State, was one of my best friends here when he was a coach, and we had so much fun. So we have a great relationship with Jackson State, but I'm looking forward to the battle on Saturday.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I had the pleasure of sitting right next to Mr. Jefferson at the Jackson State Valley game in the press box. And man, just talk about
This
fun.
year,
Yeah,
oh
a
wow,
few weeks
great,
ago.
yeah.
Whenever I need something for the podcast from a historic standpoint, I call him.
Well,
I call him, man.
hey,
He always delivers. So
well,
if
I'm living that. Excuse me, I'm living that same role here at South Carolina State. That's why I tell you, sports historian, because I've been there a long time. Of course, Sam was at Jackson, seemed like forever as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, well, I count him
absolutely.
as a great friend.
If you two are ever in the same room anytime soon, you have my number. Call me, and if I got to catch a flight, I just want to sit in on that conversation and hear some of those stories because I know y'all got them.
But thank you so much. I
All right.
appreciate you, my friend. Take care.
Again, it's been an honor. The legend himself, the Hall of Famer, Mr. Bill Hamilton. Safe travels to you and everyone else headed to Atlanta. We'll see you there.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Corey.
All right.
Take
Take
care.
care. Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Tiger Talk TV is presented by Bet Online.